Thanks, everyone. Glad to be here and join you all today to talk in depth a little bit about the subjects of my conservation work here at the Xerces Society, which are Western butterflies. The last time I led or gave a webinar, it focused more on some of the population level declines we know have happened in some or many of Western butterfly species. And I highlighted some of the particular species of conservation concern. But this time, the talk will be more on some of the amazing diversity and natural history that these animals have, and on how we can provide habitat for them through their entire life cycle. Before we get into that, for those of you who may be new to our webinar series or to the work of the Xerces Society, I want to be sure to introduce our organization and the work we do. We are an invertebrate conservation society. We protect wildlife through the conservation of invertebrates and their habitats. And we have a set of main conservation programs that I have listed here that include things like agricultural biodiversity, invertebrate diversity on farms and working lands, and the Endangered Species Program, which I am a part of, our pesticide reduction team, the community engagement team that leads things like this wonderful webinar series, and a new policy program where we are really taking a more active role in ensuring that invertebrates are included in conservation policy. And in each of these program areas, we use a multi-pronged approach to improve invertebrate conservation across public and private lands. And these approaches include scientific research, outreach, and education events like this, in policy advocacy to ensure that insects are included as wildlife in government-managed conservation, and restoration of pollinator habitat in urban and working lands. And one of my favorite things about the Xerces Society is our extremely well curated list of publications. And so I've selected just a few of them here that I think are most relevant to our talk today. But if you're interested in that, please go to xerces.org/publications and you can look through our whole collection there. And our ability to do this work is supported in large part by our incredible donors. So if you would like to donate or become a member, please visit our website. And thanks to all of you who are already members. We appreciate your support very much. So with that, forgive me for starting off with a scientific figure. I promise there are lots of pretty photos to follow, but in practice, every good slideshow starts off with a family tree of sorts. And I know that some of my mentors would be really disappointed if I didn't mention that butterflies, of course, are a very small portion of the insect order that we call Lepidoptera, those insects that have scale-covered wings and typically have a proboscis for their mouth parts. And so what is shown here is a phylogenetic tree for Lepidoptera, which is a suggestion of the evolutionary relationships between different groups of moths and butterflies. And all 7 families of butterflies are right there at that one little line. And that includes all approximately 18,000 species of butterflies worldwide. So just to know that in general, butterflies are a small portion of the group of Lepidoptera, and there are typically, we suggest, about 10 times as many moths as there are butterflies in any given location. So we're just looking at a subset of this group today. In the Western United States, we have somewhere just north of 400 species, and you can see that there is a large range in the diversity of butterflies across the Western United States, and you can pretty clearly pick out that some of the highest levels of species diversity in the West are found in the Southwest, and we will get into the reasons for that. But just in case any of you are coming from Western states, you can look up your state on here and see approximately how many butterfly species your state has. And when we think about where this butterfly diversity is located and why it is where it is, we have to look at the 2 defining features of the Western United States, and that is the variation in elevation and the variation in the amount and timing of precipitation, whether that comes as rain, snow, or both. And for those of you who possibly were raised in the Western United States, this may be just a fact of life for you. But if, like me, you were raised in the glaciated part of northeastern Ohio, I am still amazed at how these two features shape the Western landscape after living here for 17 years. And some of this variation is extremely visible even over relatively small areas. This area that's highlighted, especially in the United States, we generally call this the Intermountain West. That's the region between the Rocky Mountains and the Sierra Nevada mountains, and it is particularly mountainous due to its geologic past. I have at the top here a fairly apt quote by geologist Clarence Dutton, who traveled with George Wesley Powell, noting that the Basin and Range province has these parallel ridge lines of mountains that run north to south across huge areas. And this variation in elevation and the variation in precipitation that occur in these areas have huge consequences for the plant and animal diversity that we're going to talk about today. And so one example of this, of what this variation does, first and foremost, is it creates huge variation in the plant communities that you can be in very close spaces. These two photos were taken approximately 70 air miles apart from each other and about 5,000 feet different in elevation. And I recognize that to many of you, this will look like a very sparse landscape. There are, in fact, many different plant species hidden in and amongst the desert sand in this photo. But of course, what you do notice is a lack of trees and a lack of rhizomatous grasses largely. So there are huge differences in the plant communities beyond these, of course, although there are relatives that share each of these spaces. And then the second aspect of this variation in rain and snowfall, the second kind of result of this variation is what plants appear in a given area and when they appear and how many of them appear as well. As with much of the country, of course, we have a spring bloom in the Intermountain West, that area between the Rockies and the Sierras, and this bloom trails off substantially in much of the region as the surface of the area dries out. But we also get extremely large pulses of blooms that are dependent on the local precipitation patterns, especially in the springtime. And this photo is my own on the right here. It was taken outside of a small town in Nevada called Yerington. And that is a legitimate regional super bloom. I drive by this site all the time and it never looks like this other than once every few years, just at the right time of spring after the right types of rains pass through this area. And so this variation is a huge part of where we see butterflies and why we see them where we do. While we're talking about butterfly diversity, I wanted to quickly highlight a few very diverse regions of the Western United States, specifically for butterflies. And the first of these is a general region in southeastern Arizona. And I've highlighted a rough box here that is included in this wonderful guidebook, Southeastern Arizona Butterflies, which was published in 2022. And this region is extraordinarily diverse. As you can see, there are north of 270 butterfly species found in less than 6 counties. And this extreme diversity is largely attributable to the diversity of plants in the area. Some studies that are referenced in this guidebook have found over 600 plant species in single canyons in southeastern Arizona. And that amazing plant diversity certainly is going to foster an astounding array of butterfly diversity, and I'll get into the reasons why that is. One group of butterflies that is particularly well represented in this area are the skipper butterflies in the family Hesperiidae, and I have selected just 4 striking examples that you can find in this area as an example of the sort of diversity that you can find in southeastern Arizona. If you don't happen to live near the US-Mexico border, there are other well-known butterfly hotspots. And one of them is this very small region that's located at the border of California and Southern Oregon, which is the Cascade-Siskiyou National Monument, which has 120 species or so documented within its borders. And this national monument was actually set aside purely for its biodiversity. It is an area where the Klamath, Siskiyou, and Cascade Mountains all converge. And so this again has the effect of enhancing plant biodiversity in a small area, which then allows for butterfly diversity to flourish as well. And one of the butterflies that is in this area that the Xerces Society has spent time investing in its conservation and monitoring and management is the Marden skipper, which is a grass feeding skipper that is found only in isolated occurrences in Northern California, Southern Oregon, and Southern Washington. And one last example from my neck of the woods is the Toyabe Range, which, as you can see in this map, is located essentially in the heart of the Great Basin in Nevada. This range is approximately 120 miles long, and the valleys on either side of this are at approximately 5,500 feet, and Arc Dome down here near the southern end of the range is at over 11,700. I think the total is 11,788 feet. And so there's this huge range in elevation. And as a result of that, again, we have a lot of plant diversity. And again, that enhances the butterfly diversity in this area, where we have 99 species that are recorded from the area and 72 that are resident species. And this photo is on the right is from an annual butterfly count that we attend that's on one of the higher road passes across this range. And we are using that as an additional long-term monitoring study towards some of the conservation work that I talked about in my previous webinar. There are certainly other butterfly hotspots across the Western United States. So if you are a butterfly enthusiast and I did not mention your favorite hotspot, please forgive me. I just wanted to share some of the traits that these regions have in common that foster this butterfly diversity in the West. Thinking briefly about what these butterflies are doing on the landscape in an ecological sense, the most familiar role that we think of with butterflies is possibly as adults, as pollinators. But those of you who are more familiar with pollinator biology may know that butterflies are typically not the very best of flower pollinators, partly because they are not after the nectar, or excuse me, they're not after the pollen that the bees are after. That close relationship between bees and pollen drives that efficiency as pollinators. Most butterflies in the West are more or less incidental pollinators. They do pollinate things, but it is not by much a firm design. Another role that butterflies play on the landscape that people are possibly fairly familiar with is the role as prey. Of course, caterpillars, adult butterflies, eggs, and pupae are all preyed on by an enormous array of animals, ranging everything from spiders to the predatory wasp that's in this photo, to amphibians, reptiles, birds, and small mammals. So there is this huge array of animals that rely on an abundance of caterpillars always being present in order for their populations to thrive. But I admit that it's often hard to ascribe a function to an animal only in its death. And so, in my opinion, and I think many others, the largest role that most butterfly species are playing is as caterpillars, that is, as herbivores eating plants. This photo is, I believe I used this in my previous talk. It's one of my favorite caterpillar photos that I have found, taken by another individual. It's an Indra swallowtail caterpillar, a species of swallowtail butterfly, and it happens to be feeding on a wild carrot relative that's called Northern Indian parsnip. Over the course of the month or so that this individual is a caterpillar, it is going to eat an enormous amount of that plant. And it is only because that plant is rooted in the ground and can grow back that it does not devour the entire plant. Those of you that have raised caterpillars in your homes or in classes will have some experience with this phenomenon of how a small caterpillar eats just a little bit, but then as it gets bigger, it begins to eat just enormous amounts of plant. And so essentially every native plant that we see on the landscape when you walk outside is controlled to some extent or another in its growth by herbivores, munching on its leaves. They play a huge role in that way. And the plants that the butterflies eat is an important topic. And some of you may already have some knowledge that caterpillars require somewhat particular plants to eat. And in fact, most butterflies are fairly particular in the types of plants they can eat as caterpillars. And there are very good reasons for that. Take, for example, as we have here, a photo of the monarch butterfly, monarch caterpillar. This caterpillar is eating a species of plant in the genus Asclepias, which are the milkweeds, which many of you probably know. And milkweeds contain a set of chemicals in them that are called cardinaloids. This particular one is oleandrin. Oleander is a similar name for some milkweed relatives. And these chemicals have a number of physiological effects that can be different between mammals or birds that might eat these caterpillars or other insects that might eat these caterpillars, including just tasting bad and also including changes to your physiology. They raise your heart rates, as it turns out. And the cardinaloids that are eaten by these caterpillars are held onto in their body. They're not broken down as in the way our body breaks down alcohol when we consume it. They are held onto, and that term is sequestration. They're sequestered in the body of the caterpillar. And some of you may also know that these chemicals that are held onto by the caterpillar are passed on through the life cycle to the adult butterfly, such that the adult butterfly, even though it's not feeding on the plants anymore, still has these chemicals in them that make them distasteful or somewhat toxic to other species of animals. And in fact, some of those cardinaloids are passed down onto the egg life stage when the eggs are laid by the females as well. The result, as it turns out, of this very intimate relationship is that the monarch butterfly is restricted in the plants that it can eat as a caterpillar to only those that have cardinaloids in them. And so these are things in the genus Asclepias, and I have just highlighted some of the more common or cool looking milkweed species that can be found in the Western United States. On the right here, we have the two most common, showy milkweed and thin leaf milkweed. And then around here are some of the other more interesting, in my opinion, milkweed species of the Western US. This subverticillata milkweed is one of the, it's called horsetail milkweed. It has these upward pointing leaves, is one of the most toxic species of milkweeds that can be found in the US, has very high levels of those cardinaloids. And this photo of desert milkweed, Asclepias erosa, was taken outside the Panamint Mountains in Death Valley National Park. And so you can see that these milkweeds fill wide ranges of ecological roles themselves. This trend of a restricted diet holds true for most, though certainly not all, butterfly species, as I mentioned before. And groups of butterflies sequester various chemicals depending on the plants that they eat now as caterpillars. And so, as I mentioned, the monarch and the queen butterfly, its relative, will feed on milkweeds and have sequester these cardinaloids. Another butterfly that many of you will see across the United States, depending on where you are at, it can be one of these two species that look very, very similar. They hold on to a group of chemicals called iridoid glycosides that can also influence their immune response to things like predators and pathogens. And finally, species in the Pieridae family that feed on mustards sequester this group of chemicals that are called glucosinolates, which then, through an enzymatic reaction, once they are broken down, they form the acrid mustard oils that many of us are familiar with through a number of different contexts. Using that large marble butterfly as an example, and some of you may remember that the large marble butterfly is one of the species of concern in the Western United States. It has declined so steeply across many parts of its range where we have long-term monitoring data that the Xerces Society recently petitioned that the species be listed as threatened under the Endangered Species Act. This bond between the large marble and its mustard host plants, caterpillar food plants, really does extend to the entire life cycle of the butterfly. And it's, of course, not just as a caterpillar, but as trying to find my mouse, forgive me. As an egg here, the female butterfly is searching plants and tasting these plants with her feet to find a plant that is high quality enough to lay her egg on. And she lays her egg. In this species, they're laid near the flowers and not on the leaves. That egg hatches, and of course, the caterpillar is placed exactly where it needs to be to feed on the appropriate plant, and it feeds on that plant only for its entire time. As a pupa forming its chrysalis, they often will wander away from the plant that they have eaten, but it's not always very far. It's typically not very far, sometimes only a few feet, sometimes more. And so they need to be in the general habitat where this butterfly is. And in many times, they will make their chrysalis on a dead mustard stem, which in fact is what's shown in this photo here. And then last but not least, as adults, sometimes, depending on the plant species that the butterfly is feeding on as a caterpillar, it also serves as a nectar source for the adults. And that's what you can see here. This marble butterfly has landed on a mustard plant and can nectar from that mustard plant as well. And in some of the photos that you will see in the future, the butterflies will be mating on the plants that the females will then lay eggs on. And so this relationship is an extraordinarily close relationship. And so when I finish my talk talking about plants, that's what we'll be focusing on, is ensuring that the plants we provide include the entirety of this life cycle. Well, that's all fine and good in the summertime when there are plants around. But one of the more common questions I'm asked is, where do butterflies go in the winter? And the most familiar example that we start off with is the monarch butterfly. And those of you who know the monarch well know of its migratory patterns. They know where it goes in the west to the west coast of California, and in the east where it goes to central Mexico. But as it turns out, the monarch butterfly is not the only butterfly to make that sort of migration. Another example of that, although not as organized, certainly not quite as phenomenal in its nature, is the migration of the West Coast lady. Sorry, that's an error. I'm going to cross that out. Forgive me. I was doing a lot. Forgive me. That should be the painted lady. That is the painted lady in the photo. That's why I stumbled. It's because I thought that's not the right butterfly. This is the painted lady, and I will correct this on our presentation. The painted lady, Vanessa Cardui. So forgive me. This is the painted lady in this photo. The painted lady is known for its large migrations, and those migrations start off in the portion of the southwestern U.S. near Southern California, Baja, Mexico, and especially it seems like in El Nino years, they have these huge floods north of painted ladies, and these painted ladies will emerge as adults with huge fat reserves to allow them to fly hundreds of miles in a single direction, oftentimes without stopping for long periods of time. And they will flood large portions of the United States this way. And in turn, in the fall, they make a slightly less organized migration back south. So it does not achieve the fame and luster of the monarch migration, where they're all going to the same place and they're all making this migration in a very short amount of time. But they do migrate in a more lazy, haphazard fashion from these locations back south. Although it is certainly unclear exactly if all of the butterflies that end up all the way in Vermont and New York are making it all the way back down to this portion of the southwestern United States and Mexico. So again, forgive me, this is Vanessa Cardui. It's a mistake you wouldn't want to make. I think one of the most interesting things about this is that this butterfly makes this migration not just in the New World, but in the Old World as well. It's a well-documented phenomenon that the painted lady makes large migrations, some beginning in Central Africa and flying at high altitudes over the Sahara Desert, and many of them continuing on into continental Europe and even onward into the United Kingdom. And many of these butterflies, again, also make this migration back south in the wintertime as well. So this is one of the most widespread butterflies in the world, and certainly it appears like its migratory behavior and its ability to move large distances is probably helpful in that regard. But as it turns out, most butterflies do not overwinter as adults and don't migrate, in fact, but most of them are going to spend the winter as some other sort of life stage. Some other part of their life cycle is going to be the one that spends the winter. So in this particular species that I have here, this is the Melissa blue butterfly. The Melissa blue butterfly overwinters as an egg. And you can see here from a study, this figure comes from a study that my advisor was involved in many years ago, looking at variation in egg structure. And I just think it's a fun photo because it shows you all these really cool microstructures that the eggs have that help them hold on to the leaves that they're going to feed on as caterpillars. Other butterfly species, like this is the great spangled fritillary. The great spangled fritillary spends the winter as a caterpillar. This is a slightly larger caterpillar, but I love this set of butterflies because it has such an amazing life history. The females lay their eggs near violet plants in the fall, but by the time September has come around and these females are laying eggs, the violet plants are all very much dead and senesced for the year. So the eggs will hatch, and an unfed, very early caterpillar will find a place to hibernate, to hide itself for the winter, and then come out in the springtime and search for fresh growing violet plants. And then only then in the springtime will it start to feed. And it'll feed voraciously on many violet plants through its life cycle as a caterpillar and then emerge as an adult in the late spring. Other species, like this pierid butterfly, this white butterfly here, overwinter as a chrysalis. So this is a chrysalis here, and sometimes they'll be mounted on a rock. They might be hidden in a rock crevice here, but they overwinter in this particular life stage, waiting for their plants in the springtime. And then other species will overwinter as adults, but do not migrate. And this is a tricky example. The mourning cloak is known to migrate in some areas, but not others. In our part of the West, it doesn't seem to migrate north to south, although it may move up and down in elevation through the summertime, chasing cooler temperatures. But in the end of the summer, this butterfly will find rock crevices or bark or under leaf litter and will spend the winter as an adult waiting for the first good days of spring. And as a result, it is often one of the very first butterflies that you will see on spring days, which is just a joy for me to see the harbinger of springtime. And the other thing that I like to point out to people is that a butterfly during the growing season may look like this with this beautiful yellow border and bright blue spots. And then in the early springtime, what you'll get is an entirely worn butterfly. And there's some orange here, but in many cases, this orange will be entirely missing. And so you'll just have a black butterfly with hardly anything on it at all. And so it can be tricky to identify these species in the spring. The flip side of the overwintering coin, as it were, especially in the Intermountain West, is an extended period of drought or multi-year drought, or even just variable precipitation in the winter and the springtime. There's often the cases in our area where you will get a half an inch of rain in one location and almost no rain 10 miles away from there. So that variation means that the butterflies need to be able to respond just like their food plants are going to respond. And sometimes the drought can certainly be multiple years, which means that theoretically, the butterfly species also needs to lie in diapause, probably in shallow soil, waiting for years to match the growing conditions of its plant. The longest example of this that I have been able to find in the literature comes from a study done by a Utah lepidopterist, Todd Stout, and it uses this butterfly, which is a subspecies of the desert orange tip. And he has done an enormous amount of rearing caterpillars up to adults to see how they respond to the different plants that they eat and what the caterpillars look like through their development. And he raised one caterpillar that turned into a pupa in 1997, and it emerged from that pupa as a functional adult in 2008. So 11 years. So being able to diapause for 11 years is obviously an astounding trait, and I hope gives you an inkling of the sort of resilience that some of these species have to drought that can be unexpected year to year, but over a long time span, is something that the region is very used to. Just one last example of something that I find really interesting for species in the West is adaptations for wildfire. And in this case, I'm picking an example that's not most abundant in the Intermountain West, but is more abundant in the far West California area, over the hills from the western foothills of the Sierras over to the coast, and then further south, which is the pipevine swallowtail. I've just got the life stages here. I don't have a chrysalis, but you can see the photos here. This is an amazing species just because out of a single batch of eggs, some of these eggs will go through the entire life cycle just as you would anticipate. Some of them will wait to hatch until the fall, and some of them will pupate and then wait to hatch for some undetermined amount of time later on. And we believe that this is an adaptation to wildfire and the host plant that it eats, their response of the plant to wildfire. This pipevine swallowtail feeds on pipevine, which is in the genus Aristolochia, and Aristolochia responds very strongly to low-scale wildfires and will often rebound and have huge growth spurts after these wildfires. And so we believe that this is a possible tactic so that some of these eggs may hatch just after a wildfire when there's huge amounts of fresh plant available to grow on. Of all the various environmental forces that butterflies in the Western US face, one of the things we know the least about is their relationship with a certain class of predators that are called parasitoids. Some of you may be familiar with one particular example of parasitoid that I've shown here, which is parasitoids of the five-spotted hawk moth, which is more well known to gardeners and other folks as the tomato hornworm. And those of you that have had experience with tomato hornworms know how voracious they can be. And a typical hornworm encounter is one of these where you see it and it is on the stem of what was once your lovely tomato plant. And in other cases, you will find a caterpillar like this, and this caterpillar has been parasitized, and this is the adult wasp that is coming out of one of these many, many cocoons that are attached to this now demised caterpillar. And so in pest management, this is a good sign. You want these wasps around. These wasps are not wasps that sting us, and they're not wasps that are social. They lay their eggs on or in other animals, and in this example, caterpillars. And those animals live inside and feed on the internal organs of the caterpillar through their development and emerge typically as pupae, as you see here. And the caterpillar dies almost exclusively as a result of this encounter. And so these relationships are well known for some species, like, for example, the tomato hornworm, but they're much less well known for many native species of butterflies, for which the only way to find out what is parasitizing them is to raise caterpillars. And so this butterfly here is the Melissa blue. This is the underside, which is the same in both species. This is the upper side of the females. This is the upper side of the male butterflies. And this is a butterfly that my advisor and my wife's advisor, Matt Forrester at the University of Nevada, Reno, has worked on for decades. And so I was able to take part in a study raising these caterpillars to understand the parasitoid diversity of these butterflies in the Western United States. And as I mentioned, the only way to find this out is to raise these caterpillars and see if what you get out is a butterfly or if what you get out is a parasitic wasp or fly. And the only way to do that is to get your head down in a plant and look for caterpillars. And when they are camouflage caterpillars, it can be very difficult. So this is a photo of my wife with her head down in a plant looking for caterpillars. And sometimes the first thing you see, not always, but sometimes the first thing you see are the ants scurrying around the plants, getting honeydew from aphids and predating on various animals that are there. And sometimes you see an ant sitting very, very still, which is much less usual. It's a very unusual thing. And if you were to look very closely, you would look under this ant sitting still and you would see a very tiny, very, very tiny caterpillar. And that ant may be beginning to tend that caterpillar because these caterpillars, similar to the aphids, can also excrete a honeydew solution that the ants will gather and then protect these caterpillars in response. And as the caterpillars get a little bigger, they get a little easier to see. Here's a slightly larger one. They get to be about half an inch or a little over, and they are just chunky little cute slug-like caterpillars that are green with some light striping on them. And so we raised these caterpillars, hundreds of these caterpillars over the course of 2 years, and I'm showing just 1 year's worth of data here. On the x-axis is the number of caterpillars. On the y-axis is the number of caterpillars. On the x-axis are various sites. These are all sites that are along the edge of the Eastern Sierras. This is just west of Reno. This one is in Bishop, California. And the number of caterpillars that are parasitized is shaded slash marked here. And this is my favorite example. In this particular population, over 50% of the caterpillars that we raised were parasitized, which is fairly astounding in many people's opinions that we have gotten since then. And in fact, on this one species of butterfly, what I find is so amazing is that there were 5 species of parasitoids, including flies and wasps from 2 different families feeding on this caterpillar. So really just an incredible amount of hidden diversity just under our noses. You can see the number of counts here. So most of them were these 2, this wasp here, Anisobus, and one of the flies, this fly right here, the Eplomia. I just wanted to highlight this as one of the things that butterflies are dealing with on the landscape on a day-to-day basis that can be right under our nose and is something that we won't see unless we spend the time to do some of this detailed work. But it is one of my favorite parts about butterfly diversity in the West is the number of species that these animals are fostering by being around, even without us knowing. Okay, so for the last section of this talk, I just want to focus on what I term somewhat easily as power plants for butterflies. And as a reminder, before we start off, all butterfly species do need the same general things to thrive as individuals and as a population. And those are the food plants for their caterpillars, the nectar plants for them to feed on as adults, a safe space to pupate, that is to turn into the chrysalis and to then come out as an adult, a safe space to diapause or spend the winter, to spend these deserty times that are very dry. And they need all of these environments to be free of harmful pesticide residues. And so one of the best resources that I could refer you to if this sort of topic is of interest, and I hope that it is, would be our wonderful Gardening for Butterflies book. And so this is a comprehensive resource that deals with the design and layout and tactics of creating a butterfly garden. But then if you are from a part of the West that I have not highlighted, and there are many today that have been left out of my talk, and you feel like you don't know what plants you need, the other good news is at this website here, we have our pollinator-friendly plant lists, our native plants for pollinators and beneficial insects, and we have them for each ecological region across the United States. We've covered, as far as I know, the entire United States, or certainly the vast bulk of it. And so you can find your region and find a curated guide of plants that are options for you, and they include things like the bloom period, whether they're perennials or annuals, how much sun they need, the soil texture that they like, and additional details as to animals that they support. And so I would highly recommend that you seek these resources out if you feel overwhelmed by the plant side of working with butterflies, which don't feel alone if you do. Many people feel overwhelmed by that aspect of things. So in an attempt to make that slightly easier, I wanted to highlight just a few groups of plants as we end here for things that I think are really great in that they host butterflies as caterpillars, but that they also host many other things just by their nature. And I thought we'd start off with a really easy one, which are the milkweeds, which are in the genus Asclepias. And of course, you know that they are the larval food plants for the monarch butterflies. And you may also know that this is not a monarch butterfly that I have in this photo. It is its close relative, the queen, Danaus gillipus. And this butterfly also is a milkweed feeding butterfly. And so if you are in the southern United States, or they do range up often as far as the Reno area from time to time, you can see queens and they will feed on milkweed species. And if you're in the Eastern United States watching this, just as a shout out to the Eastern United States, there are the milkweed tussock moths also feed on milkweeds. But in addition to using it as plant material, there are many butterfly species can be found feeding on milkweed. So I have here the Ackman blues. I have some Bear's hair streaks. I have a skipper. I think this is a woodland skipper, but I'd hesitate to say for sure. And a Western tiger swallowtail, which is, orders of magnitude larger than all of these other three, all feeding on milkweed. So it is really a well-loved species, and not just butterflies, but of course other things. This is a male bumblebee hanging out on a milkweed in my yard. These are two tarantula hawk moths, tarantula hawk wasps, which feed on large spiders as for their food as larvae, and they are nectar feeders as adults. And so in large patches of milkweed in desert regions, you'll often see these tarantula hawk wasps feeding on it, nectaring on it. Second group of plants that I want to highlight are buckwheats, Eriogonums. So there's many species. This is, just to point it out, this is the genus, and then there are many species. So there is a whole Eriogonum society because they are so well loved and they are so diverse. This is the photo of the buckwheat. And this particular buckwheat that I have a photo of is the steamboat buckwheat, which is an endangered species that my wife and I were able to do a pollinator survey on a few years ago. It's in the South Reno area on a geothermally active area. And it has a local population of glaucon blue butterflies that feed on it as caterpillars. But it also had a total of 71 other distinct species or morphospecies that were visiting its flowers in the 3 weeks of surveys that we did for these populations of flowers. So I have shown you just a few here, including a Dieunomia solitary bee, a tachinid fly. This could be a parasitoid of something, probably is a parasitoid of something, a buprestid beetle feeding on some sort of tree nearby, and a flower beetle, a Claridae, in the family Claridae. So really, really amazing things will come to these flowers. They are often some of the most diverse flower visiting families. There's so many things that visit buckwheats. And just behind it, you can see all of these lupins. And these lupins, in our weeks of visiting there, had nothing but a few bumblebees on them. So, these plants right next to each other just have hugely different communities of insects visiting them. And buckwheats are always astonishingly productive pollinator flowers. So I can't speak highly enough. Just like there is an Eriogonum society, there is a penstemon society for the group of flowers that we just call penstemons. There are an extraordinary number of penstemons that are adapted to Western environments. My job previous to this one was working for Cooperative Extension, and I made a series of pollinator gardens, and these are all photos of penstemons that I had placed as landscaping plants in pollinator gardens. So they make excellent landscaping plants, and they are also host plants for at least a few different species of butterflies. The buckeye that I've got here and the Edith's checker spot is another one that I've highlighted here, but there are certainly others. So penstemons are great in that they serve as the host plants, but they're also amazing in that they serve as nectar plants for just an astounding array of bees. Typically, bees are what I see on there, although especially on the red flowers, you will see hummingbirds as well. But everything from honeybees, which might be more typical in some of your areas, to Anthophora and Bombus. And as I have mentioned, the flowers are mating locations for many, many types of insects. And so we think of these again like, oh, they go to the flowers to the nectar, or oh, they need the leaves as caterpillars. But the plant is a lifelong habitat for them. And so these are just examples of that, where this is the meeting place for these animals. Third group of plants that I want to highlight is in a whole family of plants that are called mallows. Mallows are another group of plants where there are often really great options for landscaping plants. Like these checker mallows. And then many of them are weedy and just grow in your yard, like cheese mallows or Malva neglecta, which can sometimes be called pigweed. So these things are host plants for common species, like this common checkered skipper here, feeding on alkali mallow. or as well as this West Coast lady, and this is a West Coast lady, that feeds on mallows as a caterpillar as well. This butterfly is one that is in steep decline across the Western US and is another species of conservation concern that we are trying to focus on as an organization. And many native bee species feed on mallow nectar, and some of them collect the pollen as well. There are mallow bees that collect the pollen, but many of them hang out and nectar in there. And then many male bees, just anecdotally, I see male bees sleeping in mallow flowers all the time. So it is a thing they like to do. So it provides nighttime habitat for the male bees, which are not making nests. Last group of flowers that I want to focus on are one particular subset of things in the Asteraceae family, the aster family or sunflower family. And the sunflower family is enormous. And there are many great plants in there that are host plants, that are food plants for caterpillars of various butterfly species. I even chose not to focus on any of that and just focus on rabbit brushes that bloom in the fall. Rabbit brushes are a primary nectar source for anything around from the months of mid-August through late September. They are abundant, and anything that is around can be found on them. And I have given you just a few examples of them here, ranging from this Morrison bumblebee to a really cool solitary sand wasp in the genus Bembex, to this native bee that I'm not sure I can identify, to this extra fuzzy bombyliid fly, to these various butterfly species. This is a snout, the American snout. I think this is another woodland skipper, although don't quote me on that. I mean, backing up saying that. And monarchs that are coming through in the fall and are on their way to the coast of California will frequently be seen stopping on rabbit brushes. And so this is one where at an event we found it and collected it and put a tracking tag on it so that volunteers on the coast of California may be able to record it and know that they saw it at Washoe Lake State Park in the Reno area. Last but not least, I do want to focus just on a couple trees and shrubs that are really useful as butterfly and moth food plants. And some of these will be familiar. There are many others that probably could be listed here, but I've highlighted cottonwood, willows, chokecherries, and oaks. So all of these have various species in them, various species of plants, and most of these groups host many species of butterflies and moths as caterpillars, and chokecherry possibly can serve as a nectar source as well for adult butterflies. So I try to mention trees because of their size, they have this ability to put out an amazing number of flowers as well. And so when you have flowering trees that are providing nectar sources, you really have, thousands of flowers at a time. It can be very, very economic as part of a scaling exercise. So with that, I will just thank all of our supporters. First and foremost, our Xerces Society members and an amazing array of foundations, public and private funding sources that we have that support all of the amazing work that my wonderful colleagues do. And with that, I will say thank you. This is my email address. If there's something that you have a question on that comes up later, please do email me. I'm happy to respond at any time. And I think we've got time for questions. So thanks very much.
Yeah, all right. Thank you so much, Kevin. That was really, really interesting. A lot of people were really impressed with that 11-year diapause during that long-term drought, myself included. All right, yeah, we do have a couple questions coming in. I guess starting with just information about butterflies in general, we had a question. Can you explain more about what you meant by butterflies tasting with their feet?
Yes, I did totally skip over that. So plants emit a lot of volatile chemicals, volatile meaning they go off into the atmosphere and they are on the surface of the plant a lot of times as well. And these chemicals, the amounts of these chemicals are signals of whether the plant is healthy or whether the plant is diseased, or maybe if the plant is really stressed due to being fed on by lots of aphids, for example. It could be kind of a wilty plant because it's got a big aphid infestation. And that information is accessed to the butterflies by chemoreceptors that are on their feet. And so the chemoreceptors is just like their nose. It's just that it's picking up the chemicals that are on the surface of the leaves. And so oftentimes, depending on the butterfly, there will be some visual searching where they're looking for the right color of green, they're looking for the right color flower. But when they get close to it, they taste it with those chemoreceptors on their feet, and they decide with that short little interaction if the chemistry of the plant is right to lay an egg on or not. And so that was kind of what I was saying, is they're tasting with their feet. They're using those chemoreceptors to determine if the plant is the right quality of them to lay an egg on or not. And if you watch butterflies, especially when you can tell if it's a female butterfly, it'll often be very close to the plants, moving from one plant to another. And sometimes you can see those very quick little touches of between the butterfly and the plant where it's testing it out.
Okay, yeah, thank you. That's really interesting. I'm going to keep a lookout for that.
Yeah.
Lots of butterfly plant relationship questions. So great segue here. Going back to the beginning of the presentation, that super bloom that you mentioned, are butterflies able to time super blooms and bloom their population along with them?
To some extent, yes. To some extent, no. And so it depends on the species and kind of what we're thinking about. So I already touched on the idea of them as a population timing their emergence as adults to the emergence of the right plants. And in some ways, there can be bet hedging strategies for both the plants and the butterflies, where it's not always an all or nothing super bloom, but even in some years, some plants will come out of the ground. And we will certainly see that same thing in butterflies, where there are some butterflies around, but not as many as we normally see. And then when it's a really good year for plants, it's a really good year for butterflies. And some of that may be what I'm calling bet hedging, which is just either some people waiting and some people not, right? Kind of half and half strategy. So there is that. But then butterflies that have, so some butterflies, something I didn't touch on, some butterflies have one flight generation per year. Some have 2 or 3 adult generations per growing season. So the tiger swallowtails will have multiple generations each year. An adult lays eggs and dies. Those caterpillars grow up to be adults, lay eggs and die, and another generation all in the same summer. Other butterflies, they have one flight generation, those adults lay eggs, and those eggs are going to last out till the next year. For butterflies with only one generation a year, there's not that much flexibility in being able to bloom up their population, as it were, right? Because they have the number of individuals that they started out with, minus everybody that died over the winter, is all that's left. For butterflies that have multiple flight generations a year, they can start off with a fairly small population early in the summer and then build that population up through the summertime, through those multiple generations. And so when plant growth is really, really good, those butterfly species that have multiple generations, we often see having big years at the end. So one example for that, just as a quick example, is the California tortoiseshell. It feeds on Ceanothus, buckbrush, which is often responds to fire. So in an area that's had good fire, and there's Ceanothus following it, they'll have that big plant, they'll have that plant availability. They'll have a small generation at first, but some of those areas will have huge second generations, just enormous numbers of tortoiseshells in the mountains in the second generation. So yeah, some yes and some no, and it depends on the species.
Yeah, makes sense, especially with the multi-generations.
Yeah.
Which on that, clarifying question, is the painted lady migration multi-generational?
Yes, it is. It is. The first generation does seem to move the furthest, and then they do definitely seem to slow down in the amount that they are moving, and probably they increase. Some of them probably don't move as far as others then later in the summer, but it is multiple generations through the summertime. And probably possibly multiple generations through the wintertime migration as well, where once they get further south, they may just start to lay eggs at some point.
All right, thanks for that. All right, maybe you can speak to this. Robert would like to know, why has the large marble declined so much as invasive mustards spread like wildfire? Does it only eat certain mustards?
That's a very good question. So let's start off with, sometimes we don't know all of the answer. And I will say that it is, in some ways, one that butterfly is one we are reacting to because we see the declines. It becomes obvious that we need to help it, and that is independent of what's causing it. We know, right, that, or at least we think we know, that at these long-term monitoring sites, this butterfly is declining year after year after year, and so it spurred us into action. And so those declines themselves, those count data, don't give you any hypothesis as to what is causing the decline. You still have to go back and do investigation work and kind of hypothesize. And some things that we have more evidence for than others. We have evidence that pesticide use is a huge issue for this butterfly in at least certain areas. There is a study that was done several years ago in the Central Valley of California that used long-term monitoring sites for butterflies that included the large marble, and found pretty reliable correlations between the introduction of neonicotinoid pesticides into the region and the decline of several butterfly species, including the large marble. So in some areas where pesticide use is common, I would say it is very likely that pesticide use plays a large role in its decline. A second thing that we know is causing butterfly declines across the West are particular aspects of climate change, especially warming in the fall, which creates an extended summer season, and reduced precipitation through the year, whether that comes as reduced rainfall or snowfall. Those two things seem to be the leading climate factors that are influencing declines in butterflies. And so, yeah, without the idea of like large scale pure habitat loss, and the idea that yes, those butterflies can feed on non-native mustards as well as native mustards, it does seem confusing as to what's causing it. But there's more and more evidence coming out, especially that pesticide use likely plays an equal role to habitat loss in insect declines, and probably particularly butterfly declines. And then climate change is playing a larger role as well. There was a study out of the Rocky Mountain Biological Laboratory that came out last year, I think, that showed declines across many insect groups at a very high elevation alpine monitoring site, which is subject to no other sorts of environmental stressors other than climate change. So yeah, those two things I would say are the things we know the most about.
Yeah, definitely probably need to learn a little bit more, get some more data.
Yeah,
All right.
again, just to add, there are large areas that maybe don't have, well, almost everything's experiencing climate change, some areas more than others. But the other aspect that we talk a lot about in the petition that we filed is habitat degradation. Just as one example, not to pick on rangeland management, but effects of overgrazing, non-native grazers in the area, things like that can include a loss of floral resources where maybe the mustards are around, but there's nothing else for them to feed on as adults. Or maybe the habitat is degraded in some other way where they don't have the right sort of pupation sites. And so widespread habitat degradation across the West is the other thing that we highlight in the petition.
Yeah, lots of factors, I'm sure. All right, switching gears a little bit here.
Yeah.
Caleb would like to know, is the mechanism that awakens pupae from diapause understood? What causes the variation in diapause length within eggs laid at the same time?
That is a great question.
Right.
Yeah, and especially for that pipevine swallowtail, I am not sure that there is much information on that. I will admit that phenology of butterflies is not my specialty, so you'll find me wanting in this answer, I'm sure. So of course, daylight is the, I read one somewhere, the very obvious statement that daylight is the only 100% accurate predictor of seasonality. Of course, right? Daylight always changes exactly as it should. And so it's probably, they probably have some ability to pick up what amount of light is filtering through the soil. And I would suggest it's a combination of that for the desert animals that I'm thinking of. It's a combination of that along with precipitation and temperature. So probably something like the number of frost-free days, right? The number of days where it doesn't get so cold that their physiology has to shut down. I'm guessing that sort of thing triggers a certain developmental threshold where enzymes start to activate and things just start to get into motion. And combining that with precipitation, which is a very detectable thing because it's going to filter down through sandy soil really easily. So they will know when that is happening. So the precip combined with daylight is probably what's most important as a primary combination, because that's what's going to trigger, for example, things that feed on annual plants. That's what's going to trigger an annual plant to emerge, is going to be that the amount and timing of the precipitation in the year.
Yeah.
As for the pipeline swallowtails, I can't give a good answer for that. I will tell that person that if they're interested, my favorite guidebook is written by Art Shapiro, and the second author's last name is Manolis, and it's the Field Guide to Butterflies of the Sacramento Valley and San Francisco Bay regions. And that has some of the better condensed natural history for that butterfly that you can find. So I'll refer them to there for somebody more knowledgeable.
Okay, and we'll maybe also try to include the title of that book or some other guides in the information after this webinar.
Yeah.
All right, thank you for that. Also, moving on, Julie says, I see lots of great golden digger wasps on milkweeds. Do those wasps hurt butterflies?
No, they won't hurt butterflies. I think they do probably feed on caterpillars. I like those guys, and I haven't thought about them in a little bit. I had looked up some of their natural history a few years ago, so I'm a little rusty on that. I'm fairly certain they feed on caterpillars. So in the sense that they feed on caterpillars, they are, harmful to that individual. But on the flowers, they're definitely not going to interact in any sort of negative way. And then the other thing that I just as I don't know if this is what the person was thinking, but just in case, I always point out that to have a healthy predator population, you have to have an even healthier prey population. And so the presence of predatory wasps is generally a good thing because they show you that there's enough prey for them to be around. They just won't be there if there's only flowers and no caterpillars for them to feed on. You will not see them. They're not coming just for the nectar. They need it all. And so it is a good thing when you see them in general. They're only feeding on a small portion of the caterpillars, if that was a concern. But as adults, no, they don't interact on the flowers in any negative way.
Yeah, I wondered if it was about like a parasitoid relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, thank you. Switching gears again, Laura asks, there's been a big emphasis on good fire to manage grasslands in California. How do they make sure that they burn at the proper time not to damage butterfly populations?
That's a good question. And one of the ways, so I can't speak, of course, fire in California in particular is managed by many different agencies. Cal Fire is one of the bigger ones, but there are others. And I am sure they all have their own practices. And as you may expect, many of those practices are prioritized by human health and safety. When organizations are concerned about how it affects inverts, they often come to us and they will ask us for advice or management recommendations. And I or some of my colleagues will offer them recommendations that are based on the species biology of the species that are in the area they're managing. And we definitely include fire as a consideration when we write things like fact sheets for agency staff. And we are certainly actively involved. I won't speak too much on it because I don't know the details, but I know that our monarch staff are very concerned about how various sites are managed for wildfire control, especially on the coast of California, because that management and the interaction of overwintering monarch groves is a huge issue in that portion of the coast. And so I know that it is a thing we think about a lot on our side, and we certainly keep it in our heads as a consideration when we give management recommendations. And for the most part, when we give management recommendations, my experience has been that the staff are very interested in hearing them and following them. So,
Thank you for that. All right, a couple more regional specific questions. Heading up to Washington State and then Seattle, a little more closely in there. Does Washington State have monarchs?
yes, but not that far area. If you look on the map, that little region is exempt from monarchs. They don't seem to go to the, is that the Puget Trough area? Yeah, that section of the coast of Washington, they do not occur. But other parts of Washington, they do.
Okay. And then in the Seattle proper area, Rich wanted to know any way to see a few more butterflies. Looks like they see lots of European cabbage whites, some swallowtails, some skippers in late summer. Painted ladies do visit briefly when there's a California desert bloom that spring. They have lots of host plants, native annuals and perennials. I think they just want to know how they can maybe get to see a few more butterflies.
It is hard. I have been told that butterfly gardens in the West are different than butterfly gardens in the East. And I don't have a lot of experience growing butterfly gardens in the East, so I'm referring to what I have been told, is that if it is essentially in the East, it is a case of if you build it, they will come. And if you put a butterfly garden in place, you will find the species will find that area. And it is typically not always as much the case in the Western US. It is often a little different in that even though you've put things in place, they don't find it at least as easily. So to some extent, patience is the only answer. In another type of answer I could give would be to say that the thing that allows butterflies to move from place to place is habitat connectivity. And many butterflies don't move very far at a time. And so the connections between large patches of the caterpillar host plant have to be really, really contiguous. They have to be thoroughly connected. It can't be like, a big patch here and a couple small patches and then a big patch further down. It has to be two patches with a solid line of habitat between them, because they just don't make these big leaps in distances like some other species do. And so in some ways, an answer is the best way to increase butterfly diversity is to increase connectivity to other natural habitats. Without knowing where the person lives in particular, I don't know. They could live, right up to an open space, and that's not an issue at all. But certainly connectivity is one of the things that allows those butterflies to move from place to place, and they're very sensitive to it. Outside of that, I think that you have probably done what you can. If you have the plants that are blooming through the year and you have the plants that they require as caterpillars, it is certainly the case in the West that we can't bring them in. It is tough. So I empathize for sure.
Thank you. Speaking about movement then, I love these segues. It's just perfect from one question to the next. Kim asks, sometimes I notice a caterpillar has lost its way away from the milkweed in my garden. They're hanging on to pavers or somewhere not seeming healthy for it. Should I move it back with a leaf or leave it alone?
Yeah, never fear. So many species of caterpillars, more so in moths, but definitely so in butterflies as well. And the monarch is a great example. Do what they call a wandering phase after they have fully developed. That's a specific behavior that moves them away from the food plant where all the predators and parasitoids are hanging out and to somewhere safer where they can turn into a pupa and hang out and come out in a couple weeks. And so, yeah, it's not uncommon. My favorite picture that somebody sent me was a monarch chrysalis under a lawn chair strap, like one of the vinyl straps is hanging underneath there. So they are a good example of a butterfly caterpillar that wanders after it is fully developed. Many moth species do it. And so that's typical as the woolly bears in the East Coast. You see a woolly bear wandering, along a rock, or a big yellow fuzzy Saturniid caterpillar wandering along a rock and just scooting along. And those caterpillars can move large distances in their wandering phase, but it's totally normal. You can definitely move them out of the way of your footpaths. That is totally fine. And yeah, sure, encouraged, don't step on them. Obviously, if you want them out of your way, that's a great idea. They don't have to be put back on the plant that they feed on, though. When they're that big, they're not going to the plant they feed on. They're finding a place to pupate. So you just move them out of the way and they'll find where they want to go.
I've definitely stopped to scoot a caterpillar out of a bike path
Yeah.
a few times in
For
my
sure.
life. Just you guys
For
are
sure.
just trying.
Yeah, they don't know any better.
Exactly. All right. Continuing with monarchs' eggs movements. From Santa Clara, California, Denise says, I've had several monarchs lay eggs on our showy milkweeds this year, and a couple hatched, but have had no caterpillars at all. They don't use any pesticides and are wondering what's going on. Maybe you could shed some light.
Yeah, they're probably just eaten. That's the easy answer, unfortunately. We typically suggest that about 1% of butterfly eggs make it to the adult stage. So that monarch caterpillar is laying 1 or 2 eggs on your milkweed, 1 or 2 eggs on the next milkweed patch, and it's doing that every day for 20 days. So it's laying a couple hundred eggs, and maybe 2 of those on average make it to the adult in a healthy, sustaining population. So spiders eat the vast majority of things, I think, just by their raw biomass. And there are spiders that specialize on eggs, as well as spiders that specialize on caterpillars, pupae, and adults. And so they're heavily predated on by those. Yep.
Oh, yeah, makes sense.
If they really want, there you can bring them inside to raise them and then release them as adults. But we generally, a healthy patch of plants is all that's required of you as your job, right? I really suggest that people don't feel obligated to bring things in and raise them. It's all part of the natural ecosystem out there.
All right. Okay, we have time for a few more questions, I think. Real quick, another clarifying question. Someone wanted to know, is that one of the main purposes or functions of a monarch butterfly is to keep toxic milkweeds in check, or is that a misunderstanding?
Say that one more time. Sorry, I missed part of it.
No, that's okay. Someone wanted to know, did they understand that one of the main purposes of the monarch butterfly is to keep the toxic milkweed in check?
I wouldn't say it's a purpose. That is just a semantics thing. So forgive me. But it describes a reason for being. And of course, they just are. It is their function. It is one of the functions that monarchs play as caterpillars, is controlling milkweed growth, not because it is toxic, but just as a plant herbivore, the function they fill is controlling plant growth, and controlling in the sense that plants would be much bigger, and there would be different types of plant competition. If there were no herbivores eating them, they would just be the plants would be growing at a much faster rate than we observe them growing at in nature, because they are being eaten by various herbivores. But just to point it out, there are many herbivores of milkweed. There are oleander aphids that feed on the sap on the inside, as plant suckers is the term we would use for them. Those are the orangey yellow aphids that are fairly common on milkweeds. There are longhorn milkweed beetles, the red ones with black spots and really long antennae, and they feed on the roots as larvae and on the leaves a little bit as adults. And I think there are other milkweed beetles as well that I'm less familiar with. There's milkweed bugs. There's true milkweed bugs that are black with red stripes on them that people probably see. And all of these animals are filling that same ecological function at that time of feeding on the milkweed. And just that's the thing they do. And so as a group of animals, herbivores are controlling plant growth, but it's just the function they fill. I didn't mean to ascribe it as a goal that they have necessarily.
Yeah. No, function, I think is a maybe more appropriate term there, but thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah.
All right, looking at the time here, I think we got time for one last question. Uh, hopefully you can shed some light on this topic here. We have a right of way for power lines on our property along a ridge top, which has been wonderful butterfly habitat, especially for hill-topping species. Unfortunately, the utility is doing large-scale vegetation management that is destroying the complexity of structure and are simplifying the habitat. How do I convince them to leave more of the vegetation that isn't going to drop onto the lines?
That is a hard ask. That's a hard one. I empathize with your issue. So yeah, you will not convince them as an individual to change their practices for vegetation management. Not to be discouraging in any way, but when it comes to tall vegetation, I think they have the understanding that the power company is obviously under legal obligations to do that. When it comes to the lower vegetation, you could ask if they have guidelines for what weeds and what herbaceous vegetation they are managing, because it can be variable. I am not an expert on that, and so I am starting to stumble. And what I don't want to do is give misinformation. I know power companies will often do non-native plant management, and that can actually be very good in general. If they're like spraying weedy mustards, they can be good if they are well educated on what is a weedy mustard versus what's a native mustard, and they're only working on the weedy species. That can be good in general for the vegetation management. And just to point it out, whether or not it's perfectly appropriate, some plant species, the herbaceous ones, do respond very positively to occasional management like that. Once or twice a season mowing. Milkweed is a good example of that. Milkweed responds just fine to once or twice a season mowing. We just have timing guidelines on when we prefer that management be done so it doesn't interact negatively with the monarch life cycle. And so I would start by asking them if they're able to share their vegetation management guidelines and see what practices they have in place. And I would also be aware of what species you're thinking of when it comes to like why you're concerned about it. Is it this species that breeds all year? Is it this late summer species? Is it monarchs? What is it? And think about that. And then if you have other questions, I guess I would maybe refer you back to Xerxes staff in general so that we can, come together and think about what the right actions are, because it is certainly site specific. So I know that's only a partial answer, and I appreciate the complexity of that question. So I hope that answers a little bit of it, and feel free to email some of our staff if we can be of more help.
Yeah, those are good suggestions. Thank you. All right. One more butterfly behavior life history question to end on. Do caterpillars bite? As in, I assume they're wondering, like people.
Do they what? Sorry, I missed it.
Bite.
Oh, thank you. No, they don't bite. Some of the big caterpillars, like the big moth caterpillars, can definitely give you a little scrape sort of bite because they have mandibles that are big. If you think about a full-grown tomato hornworm, if it decided to like test it out, it would be noticeable, certainly. But because they are plant eaters, they are well tuned into, I know this seems like I'm not being glib when I say this, they're tuned into what is a plant and what is not. And so they are very rarely tempted to try anything that is so obviously not a plant when they're on our hands. And to the point of eating plants, there's only one predatory species of butterfly in North America. It's the harvester butterfly, and it feeds on aphids as caterpillars. So very, very tiny animals, and again, not likely to be confused with a human hand. So some of the big moth caterpillars, you might feel a little scrape if they are kind of moving their head capsule along your hand, especially a child's hand, much more sensitive than an adult's hand. So they do tend to feel that a little more.
Yeah, that would make sense. All right. Well, thanks for that. And thank you so much, Kevin. This has been so informative. Lots of praise in the chat. Really great questions. Loved all the beautiful photos too.
Great.
I don't know if Rachel, if you have any other questions, or Kevin, if you have any other closing thoughts, but
No, I really appreciate everybody tuning in. Yeah, I think that's it. I'm glad everybody had a chance to listen to me talk about butterflies. Thanks, everybody.
I know I enjoyed it.
Thank you,
Great.
Kevin. Thank you,
Yeah.
Amber.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.